The sun was setting over the Montana plains when Sarah finally found the courage to speak the words that had been weighing on her heart for 3 weeks now, and her hands trembled as she stood on the weathered porch of the old ranch house watching Thomas mend a fence post in the distance, and she had been working as his housekeeper for nearly 2 years since his wife Martha had passed. And in that time, the old rancher had become more than just an employer to her, and he had become a father figure and a friend, and the only family she had left in this world. Thomas was 72 years old with hands that had worked this land for 5 decades, and a heart that had known both joy and sorrow in equal measure, and his weathered face told stories of harsh winters and bountiful harvests of children raised and a beloved wife laid to rest. And Sarah had watched him move through his grief with a quiet dignity that made her respect him more than anyone she had ever known. She was 34, and alone in ways that went deeper than just being single, and her own family had turned their backs on her years ago, when she had made choices they could not forgive. And she had drifted from town to town and job to job until she found this place, and this kind old man who never asked about her past and never judged the sadness he sometimes saw in her eyes. Now she carried a secret that felt too heavy to bear alone, and the father of the child she carried was long gone and had been gone before. She even knew about the baby, and she had no one to turn to and nowhere to go. And the thought of losing this place and losing Thomas's respect filled her with a fear that made her chest tight. She walked slowly across the dusty yard, and her green dress catching the golden light of the fading sun, and Thomas looked up from his work and smiled that gentle smile that had made her feel safe from the very first day. And he set down his tools and wiped his hands on his jeans, and she could see the concern already forming in his eyes because he knew her well enough to read the worry on her face. "Thomas," she said, and her voice barely above a whisper, "and I need to tell you something, and I understand if you want me to leave after I do." The old rancher's expression grew serious, and he gestured toward the porch steps, and they sat down side by side in the wood still warm from the day's heat. And he waited patiently the way he always did, and giving her the space to find her words in her own time. "I'm pregnant," she said. And the words fell between them like stones dropped into still water, and she could not bring herself to look at his face, and could not bear to see the disappointment or the judgment she was sure would be there. The silence stretched out long and painful, and she heard Thomas take a deep breath and then another, and her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest, and she waited for him to tell her to pack her things and to be gone by morning and to take her shame somewhere else. Instead, she felt his weathered hand cover hers, and warm and steady and solid as the earth itself. He said quietly, "And look at me, child." She turned slowly and through the tears that were now streaming down her face, and she saw something in his eyes that she had not expected, and there was no anger there and no disappointment, and only a deep kindness that seemed to reach right into her broken heart. "How far along are you?" he asked. 3 months, she whispered, "and the father, and he's not in the picture, and he doesn't even know and doesn't want to know." Thomas nodded slowly, and his expression thoughtful, and he looked out across the prairie, where the last light was painting the grass gold and amber, and when he spoke again his voice was thick with emotion. "You know," he said, "and Martha and I had 3 children and 2 boys and a girl, and we raised them right here on this land, and we taught them about honor and kindness and doing what's right." Sarah felt her heart sink, and thinking this was the beginning of a lecture about her mistakes and about how she had failed to live up to those values. But Thomas continued, and his hand still holding hers. "What we maybe didn't teach them enough was about grace, and we didn't teach them that life doesn't always go according to plan, and that good people sometimes find themselves in hard situations, and that what matters most isn't avoiding mistakes, but how we handle them when they come." Turned to look at her again, and his eyes bright with unshed tears. "My daughter got pregnant when she was 17, he said, and this was 35 years ago, when such things were spoken about only in whispers, and her mother and I, and we were so worried about what people would think and about our reputation, and about how it would look." Sarah listened and hardly breathing. "We sent her away," he continued, and his voice breaking now, "and sent her to live with Martha's sister in Oregon until the baby was born, and we thought we were protecting her and protecting the family, but what we were really doing was telling her that our pride mattered more than she did." A tear rolled down his weathered cheek. "She gave the baby up for adoption," said, and came home 6 months later, and she was never the same after that, and never quite forgave us, even though she never said so out loud. And there was a distance between us that never fully healed. And she moved to California when she was 21, and we talk maybe twice a year now, and always with that gap between us and that wound that never quite closed. Sarah felt her own tears flowing freely now, and not for herself, but for Thomas, and for his daughter, and for the pain that stretched across decades. I've had 35 years to think about what I should have done differently, he said, and 35 years to wish I could go back and tell my scared young daughter that we loved her, and that we would stand by her no matter what, and that she didn't have to face it alone. He squeezed Sarah's hand gently. I can't go back and fix my mistakes, he said, but maybe God has given me a chance to do better this time. Sarah looked at him through her tears and not understanding. You're not going to fire me, she asked, and her voice small and uncertain. Fire you, Thomas said, and a sad smile crossing his face. And child, I'm going to help you, and you're going to stay right here, and we're going to figure this out together. But people will talk, she said, and they'll think and they'll assume things about you and about us. Let them talk, Thomas said with a dismissive wave of his hand. And I'm 72 years old, and I stopped caring what small minds think about me a long time ago. And besides, and anyone with eyes can see you're young enough to be my granddaughter. He stood up slowly, and his joints creaking, and he pulled Sarah to her feet. Come on, he said, and let's go inside and have some dinner. And we need to start thinking about practical things and doctor's appointments and vitamins and getting that spare room ready. Over the following weeks, and Thomas proved true to his word, and he drove Sarah to her first prenatal appointment in town, and sitting in the waiting room with a ranch magazine and looking as comfortable as if he did this every day. And when they came out of the doctor's office, he asked detailed questions about her health and what she needed to be eating and what she should avoid. The talk in town started almost immediately, and small communities having long memories and active gossip mills. And Sarah heard the whispers when she went to the grocery store, and saw the sideways glances and the raised eyebrows. And she came home one day with tears in her eyes, and ready to pack her bags to spare Thomas the embarrassment. But Thomas had been in town that day too, and he had stopped by the diner for coffee. And when Mabel Henderson made a snide comment about impropriety under his roof, and Thomas had set down his coffee cup with deliberate care, and looked around the diner at the faces he had known for decades. Let me tell you all something, he said, and his voice carrying through the suddenly quiet room. And that young woman has more courage and more grace than most people I've known, and she's in a difficult situation, and she's handling it with dignity, and I'm proud to help her. He stood up and left money on the counter. And another thing, he added, and turning back, and if Martha were here, she'd be doing exactly what I'm doing and probably doing it better. And so before any of you judge either one of us, you might want to think about what kindness really means. The diner stayed quiet after he left, but slowly and one by one, and people began to reconsider their quick judgments, and Mabel Henderson herself showed up at the ranch 3 days later with a casserole and a sheepish apology. As Sarah's pregnancy progressed, and the ranch house began to transform, and Thomas brought down boxes from the attic and boxes that held baby clothes and toys from when his own children were small, and he washed and folded tiny shirts and blankets with a tenderness that brought tears to Sarah's eyes on cool evenings. They sat on the porch, and Thomas telling stories about his life and about raising his children, and about the mistakes he had made and the lessons he had learned, and he talked about Martha and how she had been the heart of this home and how he still missed her every single day. You know, he said one evening as they watched the stars come out, and Martha always said that God puts people in our paths for a reason. And I think maybe you were meant to come here, Sarah, and maybe we were meant to help each other. Sarah rested her hand on her growing belly. And how do you mean, she asked. I've been so lonely since Martha passed, he said, and going through the motions, but not really living. And you've given me something to care about again, and a purpose. And you've reminded me what it means to be needed. You've given me so much more, Sarah said softly, and you've given me hope, and you've shown me what real kindness looks like and what family should be. Thomas reached over